I'll never forget the moment my son raised his glass and made that toast. It was supposed to be a celebration, a simple, warm gesture for my 72nd birthday. But instead, it shattered my heart into pieces. "Here's to the nursing home," he said, his voice filled with mock cheerfulness. "And let's hope she enjoys it there, once we move her out." The worst part? They actually clapped. My own family, my son and his wife, applauding like it was some kind of joke. And there I was, sitting at the head of the table, barely able to catch my breath. I wasn't angry at that moment. I wasn't even sad. I just felt invisible, as if all the years of love and care I had poured into this family didn't matter. I had spent my life making sure they had everything they needed, but here I was, just a burden to them. I had always dreamed of this day being different, you know? My children surrounding me, celebrating my life, showing me the love I thought I deserved after all these years. But instead, it felt like I had become an afterthought, like I wasn't even worth the effort to pretend anymore. As the clapping continued, I could feel the silence in my chest growing heavier. I tried to smile, tried to pretend I wasn't affected, but I couldn't hide the truth. This wasn't just about a birthday. This was about everything I had sacrificed and given up, only to be treated like a stranger in my own family. I excused myself without a word, my feet moving on their own, as if my body knew what my mind couldn't quite grasp yet. I didn't cry, not then. I just walked upstairs, away from the laughter and the applause that had ripped through me. I thought I might break, right there in the hallway. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, staring at my reflection. I didn't recognize the woman I saw. The woman who had worked so hard, so tirelessly, for a family that didn't see her anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep lying to myself. I was done. No more pretending. No more being the martyr. I was done with feeling like I was invisible, like I had no value. No more. That day, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a big moment. No dramatic confrontation. It wasn't loud or forceful. It was quiet, like a seed being planted. But I knew, deep down, that I wasn't going to take this anymore. I was going to find my strength. I was going to do things my way now. For the first time in years, I was going to live for me. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, but something felt different. The weight of yesterday's humiliation still lingered, but it wasn't the same. I wasn't angry anymore. I was numb. I didn't want to face them, not yet. Not after what had happened. I sat in my bedroom, staring out the window as the sun began to rise. The light streamed in through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. I could hear the faint sounds of Mark and Carla downstairs, probably making breakfast. My mind was racing, and all I could think about was how things had changed so drastically in such a short amount of time. I thought I had raised my children to appreciate family, to value the years of love and sacrifices I had given them. But now, it felt like they saw me as an inconvenience. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Megan. "Happy birthday, Mom. I hope you have a great day. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I'll call you later." I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. She had promised to come, but instead, she sent a text. She always had an excuse. Always busy. I had gotten used to it by now, but it still hurt. I sat there for a while, lost in my thoughts, before I finally got up. I walked down the stairs slowly, my feet heavy against the wooden steps. As I entered the kitchen, Mark was sitting at the table with Carla, both of them looking uncomfortable. They didn't say anything at first. I could feel their eyes on me, but they didn't speak. I could sense that they were waiting for me to say something, but I didn't know what to say. I simply went to the counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down. The silence between us stretched out, thick and suffocating. "I'm sorry for yesterday," Mark said, finally breaking the silence. "It was just a joke. We didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't respond right away. How could they not see how hurtful it had been? How could they not understand that the joke was at my expense? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "It wasn't funny, Mark," I said quietly. "It wasn't funny at all." Mark looked at me, his expression softening. "I didn't mean it like that," he said, his voice softer now. "I was just trying to lighten the mood." I couldn't understand it. How had it come to this? I had spent years of my life taking care of them, supporting them, and yet here I was, sitting in this kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Carla didn't say anything. She just sat there, staring down at her coffee. I could feel the tension between us, and it was almost suffocating. I realized then that I had to do something. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like this. I couldn't keep allowing myself to be ignored and disrespected. I needed to take control of my life again. I couldn't wait around for them to wake up and realize what they were doing to me. I had to make the first move. And so, I decided to start looking for a way out. I wasn't sure exactly what that meant yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic environment. I had spent enough time waiting for them to change. It was time to change myself. I stood up from the table, my decision made. I'm going to take a walk, I said, my voice steady. I'll be back later. I didn't wait for a response. I just walked out the door, feeling the cool morning air on my face as I stepped into the world outside. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of freedom, a sense of possibility. The world was still open to me. It was time to take control of my own life again. I walked slowly, the air still cool against my face as I left the house. I needed to think. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. My feet moved on their own, carrying me down the familiar path I had walked so many times before. The neighborhood was quiet, as if it too was holding its breath. My mind was spinning. How had things gone so wrong? I had given so much, but it seemed like it was never enough. I had raised them, loved them, supported them. Yet here I was, cast aside. It was hard to accept that the people I had devoted my life to had turned into strangers, indifferent to the woman who had once been their mother. The sting of yesterday's toast and the laughter that followed still cut deep, but something in me had shifted. I couldn't let this define me. I had spent too many years being invisible, too many years accepting the scraps they handed me. No more. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew it was time to make a change. I had spent my life as the caretaker, always putting others first. But I realized now that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had ignored my own needs, my own desires, for far too long. Maybe it was because I had always believed that family was everything. But now I saw the truth. Family could turn on you when you least expected it, and those you loved most could become the very ones who hurt you the deepest. As I walked, I thought about my life, my late husband, the years we spent together, and the promises we had made to each other. I remembered his smile, the way he held me when I was feeling low, and how we had planned to grow old together. But now he was gone, and it was just me. It was a painful realization, but it was also freeing. I didn't have to live in the shadow of the past anymore. I had spent too much time living for others, trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy. But happiness wasn't something that came from pleasing everyone else. It had to come from within. And that's when it hit me. I had a choice. I could continue to be a pawn in their game, a victim of their selfishness, or I could take control of my own life. I could start over. I had worked hard, sacrificed so much, and it was time to finally do something for me. As I reached the park, I sat on a bench, letting the weight of the decision settle in. The world around me was calm, peaceful. I could hear the rustling of leaves in the trees, the distant sound of children laughing as they played. It felt like the first time in a long while that I could breathe freely. I didn't need to wait for anyone's approval. I didn't need anyone's permission to live my life the way I wanted to. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But for the first time, I was ready to face whatever came next. I stood up from the bench, taking a deep breath. I was ready to make the changes I needed to. And nothing was going to stop me. The next few days were a blur of quiet determination. I went about my routine, but everything felt different. I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something had shifted inside me. I wasn't sure when it had happened. Maybe it was after the toast, or maybe it was the moment I walked away from the house, leaving them behind. But now, everything seemed clearer. I had spent so many years trying to please others, trying to keep everything together, but now I realized that I had been neglecting myself for far too long. It was time for me to start living for me. I woke up each morning with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. I no longer felt like I had to apologize for existing or for taking up space in the world. The first thing I did was look into some options for my living arrangements. I had always thought that I would stay in that house for the rest of my life. But now, the thought of being surrounded by people who didn't appreciate me made me feel suffocated. I started searching for retirement communities, ones where I could have my own space, where I wouldn't have to walk on eggshells every time I entered a room. It was strange, this feeling of independence. For so long, I had been dependent on others, on Mark, on Carla, on the idea of family. But now, I was starting to realize that I didn't need anyone's permission to live my life the way I wanted. I didn't need their approval to take care of myself. It was hard at first. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, when I missed the way things used to be. I missed the idea of family. I missed the warm dinners, the laughter, the way we used to be before everything changed. But then, I would remind myself that the family I longed for no longer existed. That family had become a hollow shell, a place where love and respect no longer mattered. I spent hours researching different places, making phone calls, and visiting communities. Some of them were nice, but they all felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. It wasn't until I found a small, quiet place on the outskirts of town that I felt like I had found a glimpse of what I needed. It wasn't fancy or new, but it felt right. The people there were kind, the environment peaceful. It wasn't just a place to live. It was a place where I could start over. I signed the paperwork that day, and as I walked out of the office, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had done it. I had made a decision for myself. I had taken control. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I packed up my things, said goodbye to the house I had called home for so long, and moved into my new place. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, when the fear of being alone overwhelmed me. But every time that fear crept in, I reminded myself that I was no longer the woman who had put everyone else's needs first. I was Linda Thompson, and I was finally living for me. Weeks later that I received a call from Mark. I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon. I had thought he would let me go, that he would move on with his life without a second thought. But there he was, his voice strained as he asked if we could meet. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. I didn't respond right away. I had no idea what he could possibly want from me after everything that had happened. But there was a part of me that still wanted to believe that there was hope, that maybe he had finally realized how wrong he had been. I agreed to meet him at a cafe, hoping that I could finally get some answers. When I arrived, Mark was already sitting at a table by the window, his coffee cup untouched. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. "I know you're angry," he started, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "And I get it. But I need you to understand something. Carla and I," he trailed off, as if searching for the right words. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. We were just," he paused, taking a deep breath. "We were just overwhelmed, and we didn't know how to handle everything. I'm sorry." I looked at him, trying to read his face, to understand if this apology was real or just another attempt to cover up what had happened. It felt like too little, too late. "You think saying sorry is going to fix everything?" I finally asked, my voice steady but filled with years of pent-up hurt. "You think that after everything, after what you did to me, all I need is an apology?" Mark opened his mouth to speak, but I stopped him. "You don't get it, Mark. It's not just about that toast. It's about everything you've taken from me, my dignity, my worth, my place in this family. You've made me feel like I don't matter." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I spent my whole life giving to you, to Carla, to everyone around me, and what do I get in return? Humiliation, disrespect, and the worst part? You didn't even notice." Mark looked away, his eyes falling to his hands. For a moment, I thought he might finally understand. But then he looked back up, his expression hardening. "I don't know what you want from me, Mom," he said, his tone defensive. "I'm trying to make it right. But I'm not going to beg." I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. "I don't need you to beg, Mark. I just need you to understand that I'm done. I'm done trying to make things work when you and Carla don't even care." I walked out of the cafe without looking back, the finality of my decision settling deep in my chest. As I drove back to my new home, I realized something important. This was my life now. No more pretending, no more begging for love or respect. It was time for me to move forward, without looking back. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace I had hoped for, but it was the peace I had earned. And that was enough. It had been weeks since the last conversation with Mark, and though I tried to stay focused on my new life, there were still moments when the weight of everything felt unbearable. The quiet of my new home, while once comforting, now sometimes felt like a reminder of the isolation I had come to know all too well. I spent my days getting familiar with the neighborhood, exploring the little town around me. The park became a refuge. The scent of the grass, the sound of children laughing. It was the kind of peaceful noise I hadn't experienced in a long time. But there were still nights when I felt like I was drowning in memories. The absence of Mark, Carla, and even Megan, despite her brief texts, gnawed at me. I had spent years taking care of them, always putting their needs before mine, and now it felt like I was nothing more than an afterthought to them. There were nights when I found myself staring out the window, wondering if they even missed me. It was during one of these moments of silence that I received a call from Megan. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, her voice softer than it had been in years. I hesitated before answering. "I'm fine," I replied, though I wasn't sure. I believed it. "You don't sound fine," Megan said, sensing the strain in my voice. "I've been thinking about everything." I closed my eyes, unsure of how to respond. There was so much I wanted to say, so much I had kept buried for so long, but the words felt stuck. "I'm sorry, Mom," Megan continued, her voice cracking. "I should have been there. I should have called more, but life, it just got in the way." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her how deeply hurt I had been by their actions, how it felt to be cast aside, how I had spent so much of my life waiting for them to see me, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us. Finally, Megan spoke again, her words careful. "Can we meet? Can we talk about this?" I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, anger, confusion. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her, to open that door again, but at the same time, part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for healing. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. As we ended the call, I sat in silence, unsure of what to do next. I had spent so many years letting them define my worth, letting their actions dictate how I felt. But now, for the first time, I realized that I didn't need their approval to feel valuable. I had taken back my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. Whether or not I chose to meet Megan was irrelevant. What mattered was that I was no longer dependent on their love or acceptance to feel complete. I stood up, looking around my small home, and for the first time, I truly felt at peace. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I would no longer be the person who waited for others to determine my happiness. It was a quiet afternoon when I finally decided to visit Megan. I had spent days thinking about it, torn between wanting to heal the broken parts of my heart and not wanting to relive the pain that had been inflicted on me. But I realized that I couldn't keep running from the past forever. I needed closure, and if I was ever going to move forward, I needed to face it. As I drove to her house, my mind wandered. I thought about all the years I had spent raising my children, all the sacrifices I had made for them, all the times I had put my own needs aside for the sake of their happiness. And yet, in the end, it had all seemed to be in vain. I reached Megan's house and parked in front, taking a deep breath before stepping out of the car. The house looked the same as it always had, but it felt different now. It wasn't just the distance between us. It was the feeling that we were strangers, that the connection we once had been broken beyond repair. I rang the doorbell, my hand trembling slightly as I waited. When Megan opened the door, I was struck by how much she had changed. Her face was older, more tired, and there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She stepped aside to let me in, and I followed her into the living room, where we sat down across from each other. The silence between us was thick, but I didn't know where to begin. Finally, Megan spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, her voice soft. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't take back what's been done, but I want you to know that I regret it. I should have been there for you. I should have done better." Her words were sincere, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But it wasn't enough. I had spent too many years waiting for the apology that never came. I had spent too many years longing for the love and support that never materialized. And now, I realized that I couldn't keep waiting. "Megan, I love you," I said quietly, "but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I've spent too much of my life trying to make everyone else happy, and I've forgotten about myself in the process. I can't keep doing that. I can't keep allowing myself to be invisible to you and Mark." Megan's eyes filled with tears as she reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I know, Mom," she whispered. "I know. And I'm so sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the regret in her eyes. It wasn't the same as before. This wasn't just empty words. This was a daughter who, despite everything, still cared. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that I could forgive her. Not for everything, but for this moment. For the fact that she was finally seeing me, truly seeing me, for for the first time in years. We sat there in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging in the air between us. But in that silence, I felt something shift. It wasn't a magical fix, and it didn't undo the years of hurt. But it was a start. It was a step in the direction I needed to go. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this world. It had been a few weeks since the conversation with Megan, and though things were still far from perfect, I felt a shift within myself. There was something about that conversation, something about finally being seen, that gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't forgiveness, at least not completely, but it was a step in the right direction. Megan had reached out, and though I didn't expect her to fix everything overnight, it was a start. But as time passed, I started to realize something else. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. I spent years trying to make everyone else happy, trying to fit into their world, and in the process, I lost myself. But now, for the first time, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't waiting for them to change. I was changing. I had stopped looking to my children to fill the void I had been carrying for so long. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, when the silence of my house felt like too much to bear. But in those moments, I reminded myself that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had built a life for myself, one that wasn't dependent on anyone else. It was my life to live, and I would live it on my own terms. I decided to take up some activities I had always wanted to try but never had the chance. I joined a local book club, something I had always wanted to do but never thought I had time for. It was small, just a handful of women from the neighborhood, but it felt like a step towards something new. I also began volunteering at a community center, helping with elderly residents who didn't have family around. It wasn't about filling the emptiness left by my children. It was about giving back, about finding purpose outside of the roles I had always been expected to play. And slowly, the emptiness started to fade. I still missed the idea of family, the idealized version of what I thought it should have been, but I began to realize that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the connections we make, the people who show up, the ones who truly care. I didn't need to be part of a toxic dynamic to have a fulfilling life. I had a choice, and I had made it. I was done being the person who waited for someone else to take care of me, to show up for me. I would be my own support system. I would create my own happiness. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see the world differently. The weight I had been carrying for so long had finally started to lift. I didn't need to be defined by the actions of my children or the way they treated me. I was more than that. I was Linda Thompson, a woman who had loved deeply, sacrificed endlessly, and now, for the first time in a long time, was ready to love herself. I knew there would still be moments of doubt, times when the loneliness would come back, but I was stronger now. I had found my peace, and I was ready to live the rest of my life on my own terms. It had been a year since I made the decision to start living for myself, and when I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized just how far I had come. The person I was before seemed like a distant memory now. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together for others, but in the process, I had neglected myself. Now I was taking control of my life, and it felt good. There were still difficult moments, of course. There were days when the loneliness crept back in, when I missed the idea of family, the holidays, the celebrations, the simple moments of connection. But then I reminded myself of all the new experiences I had gained, the friendships I had started to build, and the independence I had discovered within myself. I was no longer waiting for others to validate my worth. I had learned to value myself, and that was more than enough. One afternoon, I received a call from Megan. She sounded different this time, her voice more genuine, and I could hear the hesitation in her words. "Mom, I know I've made so many mistakes," she said softly, "but I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to try again. I want us to have a relationship, even if it's just starting over, one step at a time." I paused, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. I had spent so many years wishing for this, hoping for the day when she would finally understand. But now, it felt like I had already moved on. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open that door again, to expose myself to the pain that had come with it. But I also knew that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding peace within myself, regardless of the past. "I'm open to that, Megan," I said, my voice steady. "But things have changed. I've changed. I'm no longer the same person I was before." There was a long silence before Megan spoke again, her voice soft but filled with hope. I understand, Mom, and I'll be patient. I just want you to know that I love you, and I want to try to make things right. After we ended the call, I sat quietly for a while, reflecting on everything. Part of me wanted to rush back into the familiar, into the life I had known for so long. But another part of me knew that I couldn't go back to that. I had built a life for myself, and I wasn't willing to let go of the peace I had found. I realized that I didn't need to fix everything at once. I didn't need to repair the past in order to move forward. I had already begun the process of healing, and that was enough. I didn't need anyone else's approval or validation. I had learned to trust myself again, to believe that I was worthy of happiness, of peace, of love. And with that realization, I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready to face it. Not as the woman I once was, but as the woman I had become, a woman who had learned to live for herself, who had learned to find her strength in the silence, and who had finally found the courage to let go of the past.